Please welcome Mike Nichols and Jason Reitman. Oh, I'm so nervous right now, you have no idea.
Well, I can take a minute so that you can pull yourself together. As I tried to do on the way down, I have to explain that I'm on antibiotics. My wife wanted me to tell you
Oh,
that.
this is going to be good.
Well, that's it. She says it makes me a little woozy. Either she said it makes me a little woozy, or she said you're always woozy. I can't remember which, but you're better off than I am.
I have so many questions, and they're all over the map. I mean, I have questions about the littlest things and the questions about what the film means. I'd love to start and just talk to you about where this film happens in your career, because this is your fourth film, and you come out of the gate like no other director in history. I mean, your first three films are Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, The Graduate, and Catch-22.
May I say,
It's just,
I'd like to say, look who's talking.
it's
You didn't do so bad yourself.
I don't even enter the arena. I'm not in. It's simply astonishing, and you're coming off of Catch-22, which is also such a technically complicated film. And I just watched it again recently, and I listened. There's that wonderful commentary that you did with Soderbergh.
Right.
Just brilliant. And if you haven't heard it, you really must listen. It is truly extraordinary. And I understand that was a 6-month shooting, describing how you did all these shots. And you come off of those three films, and you make the decision to make this movie, which one is very clean and simple in its narrative, as far as, it's a film that takes place in New York. There's only so many scenes. It's unlike Catch-22, you're not blowing things up, and there's not 20 planes in the air. And you also decided at a moment where I imagine you could really make any movie. You could make The Phone Book if you wanted, to make a very challenging film. I mean, I'm only presuming that this must have been the scariest movie you ever made going in.
I didn't feel scared.
No?
No. Because one thing, it was one of the very few times I knew exactly what I was going to do, pretty much as soon as I read it. Jules Feiffer was already an old friend, even though we were still young. And he sent it to me while I was cutting Catch-22, I guess in L.A., and it was a play. And I read it, and I called him, and I said, I don't want to do a play. This is a movie, I think. Because the first thing I knew when I read it was I wanted to see those who were not talking. I wanted to see the women. In other words, I didn't want to see everybody all the time, the way you do in a movie, unless you punch somebody up. The way you do in a play. I didn't want to just see a group of people, because I couldn't tell this story on the stage. It would be sketches. But I knew what could be done in the movies, and it was what I wanted to do. I wanted to do a movie about the listener, not the talker. Because that had always, being a talker, as I always was, it interested me very much, what they were thinking.
It's true. You often in this film, you're on the person who's getting it rather than the person who's giving it. And also, and again, I'm not sure if this played in or if these are the kinds of subconscious things that happen when you're directing. you feel, though, that it came from a play. I mean, of course, this is coming off of films in which you had already established a style of very complicated masters and staying in one shot. But even though, again, it doesn't have the timing complications of some of the shots in Catch-22, where someone's going to drive by and then an explosion has to go off, there is a you stick to these shots like almost as if you were doing a play. I mean, do you think that carried over from the fact that it was a play?
No, it had to me, that was about them living every minute. I mean, experiencing every minute, which is what you do when you're young. As you get older, you tend to cut ahead. When you're young and hot, and especially about the other sex, you go moment by moment by moment, or so it seemed to me. And I was very interested. Look, this whole thing that we love, which is on its last legs, of a bunch of people in a dark room.
Are you talking about movies or sex right now? I'm just trying to...
I'm glad you asked me, because
okay.
I suddenly realized that's how I was. I'm talking about movies.
I think you're right in both cases, sadly, but yeah.
Well, it's true of the theater and movies that we don't know how long it'll take. It's like radio. It takes a long time to die. But it's on the way. And what we would miss, I think, is what to me is still, I'm old, I get jaded, but there's one thing that still gets to me. And it happened somewhat tonight. I mean, I haven't seen this movie really for a long time. And it's the thing I love. It's why I still do this. It's a large group of people sitting silently in the dark, all seeing something that is not spoken. And that really gets to me. I love being on either side of that. I love having been part of bringing it about. I love feeling it. I love gasping all together. I love all of us being in a place, seeing something that is unnamed but clear, such as he's being a real shit to her. You can't miss it. I mean, I took an easy one. But extrapolating things together, I think it's still a very good experience.
Yeah, well, and particularly in a film like this where almost always people are not saying what they're thinking, and you're interpreting every set of actions, and the film is incredibly ahead of the audience. It's fascinating because it's a groundbreaking movie on so many levels. I mean, there's the obvious ways in which its language, the subject. I read online that it was the first movie to show a condom on screen. I'm not sure if that's the truth or not.
I had a condom in The Graduate, but nobody's ever caught it.
Oh, okay. But then just simply narratively, the fact that you get to know these characters for the first 40 minutes of the film, and then one of them disappears forever.
I was thinking today about Jules, naturally, and I was thinking that he was a great cartoonist. He is a great cartoonist. He's just doing it in a different way now. And as a cartoonist, he knew a lot about two things: character and time. Because time is really interesting in cartoons, as it is in novels. How is it dealt with? If you sit down and try to write a novel, which don't worry, I haven't done, is that one of the first things you have to deal with, of course, is time. You read an inexperienced novel, and it takes like 15 pages to wake up, and then 2 pages to go like 3 years. What are you going to do about time is one of the main questions in what we do, and in storytelling altogether. And I think time is, in fact, the subject of this movie. I don't think it's sex, and I don't think certainly that it's love. I think it's time, and the way that time has of finding out who you are.
I think it's kind of the scariest part of this movie.
Yeah.
Is that when you watch it, and this is a movie that was made before I was born, and when I first started watching it, I remember for the first time, and I saw them as college students, I really thought, oh, this is going to be a very charming film. And I just thought, this is so sweet the way they talk about sex. They're in college. I remember thinking this way when I was in high school. And then it just grabbed me by the balls. I mean, frankly, when it started to move forward in time, and then suddenly it was way ahead of me. And it was terrifying. And the way any great biography makes you feel that sense of time as you watch a character go through, but this one lures you into thinking that you were going to be in one place, and then it jets forward, and it must scare people. Is this a more controversial film today than it was the day it came out?
I think in a way, yes, because first of all, I don't think that what's wrong with those two guys is universal. I think it was a couple of specific generations after the Second War. I think that particular lack of any esteem or even seeing women as anything but receptacles, I think that came at an odd time and then left. I don't think you...
Yeah, totally.
It left to some extent. The point is that the battle has been joined. It's been pointed out, and God knows not by carnal knowledge, there was no missing it. And there's still no missing it, but it's taking different shapes and different shapes. You know, on television and politics, as we see every 2 months, it always takes the same shape. But in real life, I think it takes many different shapes. And that as the world is sort of moving towards its end, we're getting better in a lot of areas in the last minute. And that's one of the areas in which I think we're getting somewhat better. God knows we're not there, but the movement is taking place.
You don't think that perhaps we've gotten more conservative and better at hiding it?
Yes, I think that.
I wonder, when I watch this, I think, and people say this all the time, oh, they can't make movies today the way they used to, and certainly in a lot of cases, that is about studio demands, that is about how the theater system works, and DVD, and there's all sorts of arguments have been made. But in this film's particular case, I wonder if it really is because the audience has changed, and that and again, I wasn't alive when this film came out, so I'm just presuming. But I look at this film, and it really upsets me that there are no films like this now, and that there is no honesty on screen. This is the most honest movie I've ever seen, in the way it looks into, particularly the male mind. Do you think that this film could be made today? I know people ask that question all the time, and I hate that question. But in this case, I think it's actually important.
I don't think it could be made today. Among other things, it wouldn't be entertaining today. No specific would be recognized. I don't mean this exact film.
Did you want it to be entertaining? Was the idea for it to be entertaining?
Well, yeah, as long as it could be. In other words, I didn't want them to be looking when the trap was sprung.
Right.
Right. I wanted them to be thinking about something else. Anne Margaret's top, for instance.
Right.
Anything you like. The more I could get them to look at her, the more they would be complicit in what happens to her.
Right.
What I'm thinking about when you were asking that is Pauline Kael. Pauline Kael, who hated it. She was I'm happy to have to explain, but not to you guys, I guess. She was the feared critic of the New Yorker, film critic. And what she said was, it's a neon sign spelling out the soullessness of neon. And I thought,
again, beautifully said, but still, no.
Well, I wasn't going to agree.
No. I just meant the word choice was lovely, but the sentiment wasn't exactly right.
No, but I just mean that they were very defended against it. It wasn't what some people now are, do, which is, wow, oh my God, something happens to you seeing it. There was some of that, but there was a lot of resistance. It's very weird about movies, how you don't know which ones are going to stay alive and which ones are going to be meaningless. And then there are the Preston Sturges movies, all the astonishing ones that are exactly as alive as they were. But when you're there, you couldn't possibly predict. I don't know why. But some things slowly die, and some things stay a while. It's never forever. There is no forever in movies, as we know. This is one of the last prints kind of thing. But
it was great to see that. I'd seen it so many times on DVD. I've never seen a print, and it was wonderful to see the amount of detail in the print. And I would hope one day they would make a better transfer for a Blu-ray or something like that.
I hope they would make a better print. I'm exactly where I end up where I began. One of the reels was too dark. And that was what I said with
This
my
is your
first-
copy of the film, right?
Yes, yes, but still, one of the reels is too dark. I drove myself, opening night of Virginia Woolf, when, you know, there were all these things, people went nuts in the papers and everything. I just kept thinking that second reel was so dark. It took me years not to be that kind of asshole. Well, I'd say I'm not there yet.
I think that's an important type of asshole to be, though, I think, if you're going to be a director. Art Garfunkel.
Yes.
He had a small part in Catch-22.
Mm-hmm.
This is an enormous part, and it actually kind of speaks to something that you brought up earlier, which is time, because the way this film holds time is exceptional. I mean, I watch and I'm in complete envy of your power as a director to control time, particularly in these shots where you don't cut. I rely so heavily on editing. I consider myself an editing director, and you have to trust your actors like crazy. And there's moments where Art doesn't talk, and he's controlling the movement of the scene. And I'm just wondering how you knew he could do it and how you established the timing of these scenes.
Well, first of all, I had the exciting experience of about 1 or 2 or 3 movies after that discovering cutting. And I got all excited. And you can imagine the fun I had. But this, of all the movies I ever worked on, this is the one that was most unalloyed pleasure from first to last, every minute of it. Even when it came, I was hanging with Buck Henry and my friends, the editors, and I had gotten this from Jules, and I finished, and I said, Buck, have a look, and we were all bullshitting, and he sort of read it as we talked, and then he finished, and he said, well, you've got to do this. I said, I think so. So what happened when we all went to Vancouver, same reason as now, it was cheap, and you could get everything from Vancouver, campuses and different weather and all. And I loved everyone in the cast, and some were already friends, like Candace. Jack became a friend in like 3 days. I saw a pre-release cut of Easy Rider, and I said, I gotta have that guy.
Right.
And I got him, and so on. But Artie had been so funny in Catch-22. We had a scene in Catch where he had to smile. It was just a smile, but he couldn't.
I immediately realized why you knew he'd be perfect.
Well, wait. And we were all crowded around the camera making faces and doing things, and whoever it was making stuff to make him smile. And Art said, I feel like a baby. And I said, well, you are a baby. We're having to make you smile by doing things. You don't have any technique. Now, God damn it, smile. Anyway, by the time I knew, I wanted him for a very strange quality that he had, which is, well, Rotuno, the world's greatest DP at the time and for a long time after. He was Fellini's DP, and he was actually some kind of very great man. And we had a whole big meeting when we all arrived in the only place in this hotel I was, which is sort of like a large Chinese restaurant on the water. And we had the dinner, and we all talked, and everybody met everybody. And then after they all left, Peppino Rotuno, the DP, and I stayed behind to have another cup of coffee. He said, you know, he didn't speak very much English. He said, Jack, he has, and Jack was already the Jack we know. You know, he was funny, he was raucous, he was bawdy, he was gorgeous. He said, Jack, he has in his face like a saint. And I actually happen to think he's right, but then he said, in art, he's like a little, how do you say, malizioso. And there was this thing about Artie, that he had this golden aureole of hair, and he was all sweet and beautiful. But there was something else, something a little unnerving, a little malicious, a little other that was in his quality. I don't mean, I'm not talking about his character or personality, and what you got from him as a performer, and that's what I wanted. And Jack, first of all, Jack had a hot tub, and I don't have to say any more.
We should have started with that.
Second of all, Artie was over there all the time. At the time, he had a girlfriend that we were all terrified of, but he didn't have her all that long, because Jack somehow took care of that too. And there was more and more fun, and everybody got closer and closer. And it was so easy. The scenes were so easy. We were finished by like 3 and 4 o'clock in the afternoon. And we'd go to a Japanese restaurant. And Jack would have some stewardess, you know. And we were happy. How can I put it?
How are you getting done at 3 or 4 o'clock? I mean, when I look at these shots, I feel like I'd have to rehearse these shots for 2 days before I'd ever get a crack at shooting them.
Well, I always rehearse, and we rehearsed the whole thing for about 3 weeks. And we rehearsed exactly for those things. We found the shots, we rehearsed the shots, and we talked about what's happening, and Jack was helping. Here's how Jack would help Artie. We began with the first scene in the dormitory. And Jack said, let's stay there a couple nights. Let's live in that room. So they did.
So that wasn't a set. The interior dorm set was a practical.
No, it was a set.
Oh, see, they were living in a stage.
They spent the night on a stage, going outside to the men's room, coming back to their bunks.
Oh, that's great.
And Jack, all the time, for the whole course of the rehearsal and the movie, was teaching Artie his approach to movie making, which is basically, there's even in a small, cheap movie, there's like, what, 100, 125 people? Jack is connected to all of them. If there's a ring of trailers, he's connected to the wardrobe lady on the other side of the wardrobe. And he connects with them when you say action, and they're all watching him. He had some nude scenes. I don't think they're in anymore, I'm happy to say. But he was hilarious. He'd say, all right, here comes Steve, get ready for him. And he would make such a fool of himself that everybody else was cool.
He's always in the shower in this movie.
Yes, make of it what you will.
I'm so happy I got to ask you that.
Well, that speaks for itself, doesn't it?
Yeah,
when does he get in the shower?
You could interpret it.
At what point does he tend to get in the shower?
Let's see, he's always getting in the shower when...
Yes.
God, I mean, I imagine right after he has sex, but...
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
That's all.
All right, good. I mean, can I throw out a theory and you could just bat it down and tell me?
Oh yeah, I
if
like
it's wrong?
that. Sure.
Okay, great. Watching this film, sometimes I feel as though when I look at these two guys, I feel like every man is these two guys, and it's just a question of which one they present to the world. And you're almost waiting for a Fight Club type moment where you realize it's in fact the same human being. I mean, is there some truth to that? I mean, it's just every man is both men, and it's just a question of whether we're honest or whether we lie. And Jack Nicholson is the honesty, and Art Garfunkel is the kind of the well-trained.
I think, yes, I think that's a good way to put it. I think that's true. I think that was, Jules and I never spoke about that, but if you'll notice, all of Jules' strips are always two guys. And they're always talking, whatever the subject is. It's a dialogue between the two guys, not unlike this. Very many different characters and different places and different kinds of people, but it's guy to guy. And that thing that starts for you in high school, for me in college, for some guys in the Army, where in some weird way you and the other guys become each other for a while, try out being each other. It's somehow plugged into that, I think. I think it's in a really strange way something that had to do with the war. That these guys did come out of the war. And they depended on each other in a way that not only excluded women, but was obsessed with women simultaneously, and then they kept that going. There was no way for them to get out of that particular straitjacket because that's where they had lived under enormous pressure and terror. And it's in some way annealed them into this relationship with each other and with women. And this particular kind of cruelty, callousness, blindness, has been transformed into other things, far subtler things, I think. That's it.
It's interesting. I get a little sad when I think about what you just said about that moment when you're in your teenager, your early 20s. I feel like perhaps we've already lost the last generation that strangely had that. I mean, when I watch the two guys talk about women and talk about sex and their understanding of it, because the internet, I'm not sure if there really is ever going to be a teenager again that has that kind of innocence. That, I mean, by the time a kid is 14 or 15 now, I say this as a father of a daughter, a terrified father, they will have seen things that you and I couldn't, well, maybe you and I, but no, that one couldn't even imagine. And will these conversations still happen? When I look at that dormitory conversation, does that still happen, or have they already seen a video of just things that the two characters never see?
I don't know. I could ask my son. My guess is not as much. One of your movies, the miracle of J.K. as a kind father came right when I had started to develop a theory based on seeing Angels in America and seeing the scene where the Mormon mother asks the real estate woman for a cigarette. Do you remember that scene? Did you ever see the play?
I'm sorry, I've never seen Angels in America. I knew I was going to embarrass myself at one moment, and there it was.
I won't say you could see my version because this scene is not in it, so you're okay.
Okay.
But there is a scene in which this very, very strict, tough Mormon mother, played in the movie by Meryl Streep, she's selling her house because she's going to go to her gay son's side in the city. And she's very censorious and everything, and then she says to the real estate woman who's lit a cigarette, she says, "Give me a drag." And the woman gives her a drag. She goes, "Oh." And you just see a moment of connection. And I went to my acting class the next day and I said, I have a feeling that kindness is the new porn. That when we see kindness in something, it's so shocking and so emotional, which happened to be in your movie. The fact that a father could say, "Oh, what are we going to do?" It got everybody. I was not alone. It was the truly shocking thing in that picture. What if there was a father who was not an asshole about this situation? What would happen? And you created a whole family that told each other the truth and actually loved each other and helped each other. It was a wild idea.
I can't take credit for that. It's Diablo Cody who wrote that screenplay,
Yeah.
and she, and that was exactly what made me fall in love with that script. Was
Well,
that
yes, but
every
most
time-
people would have killed it on the first day. So you are to be congratulated
Oh.
because it was in every scene, it was in every moment, and it's a wonderful movie. And the whole idea that kindness doesn't have to be boring, because it is more and more rare. I mean, not everywhere. New York, in fact, which used to be incredibly pricky, is really quite kind now. Everybody is nice to everybody, by and large. You should have seen it before. It was worse than Paris.
Okay, this brings up a question that, again, is one of the worst questions, and I hate when people ask me this, but again, I think this film begs it. Can you envision any of the moments that these two characters have beyond the time that we see them? I ask this because we see them at 4 different moments, and I can't help it. I'm close to the age that you were when you made this film, and I want to do that to an audience. I don't pretend to think I could make something this brilliant, but I want.
You have made
I want
something
to.
that's brilliant.
I mean, really, I want to. What I love is how this film upsets me. And that's why I asked you earlier if you wanted to entertain, because obviously the film's entertaining, it's funny, and it's moving, and it takes you, but it upsets me, and I think, I love that about it.
I love that. I love to do that. I mean, it's one of the things we get to do.
I'm not sure if we get to do that anymore. That's part of what I was asking earlier, too, is I'm not sure if there is the opportunity to upset the audience in where there may used to have been, or maybe I just wasn't there.
I'm trying to think of it. I've been upset in the last few years by things like The Ghost Rider, for instance.
Well, that Ghost Rider with Nicolas Cage?
No.
Oh, okay. Because that film was really upsetting, but in a completely different way.
I mean the
Polanski Ghost Rider.
I thought
We
that
see
was-
different movies. No, I'm just kidding.
That was upsetting, no?
I haven't seen
You haven't
Ghost
seen
Rider.
it. It's upsetting, right? I think it's still possible. I think everything, obviously, has changed quite a lot. And we have to find out. It's usually the thing that gets us is a simpler thing. And it doesn't need many planets or many visual effects, all of which we love altogether. They're cool. But to be upset in a sense that is, in the Greek sense, that has gotten to something that you don't have the words for, but that is also your life. That's one of the reasons we're here. So that I'm going to find out, because I'm about to do Death of a Salesman, God help me. And I will find out if we're still good enough to do such a play, a great play, and B, is there anybody who will come with us? I don't know either. But this weird thing has happened in the theater where suddenly there's astonishing and very good things. Which is it's the thing about the world until it's over, is that you can still get completely surprised by something goes further and further and further into the toilet, and suddenly there's this beautiful aurora borealis, and there's a whole new chapter, which I think is what's happened in the theater. And it might even happen in the movies. The reason that most English actors are better than most American actors in the end is that they don't make any money. They at the very end of their lives, they get into a space movie and then they make a lot of money. But until that happens, basically, they've told me, even the famous ones, they don't have bank accounts. They live from day to day. And as the theater moves in that direction, except for the Disney musicals, it becomes better because they're actually doing it to do it, which God knows actors do. And it's not a great way to make money. I mean, for maybe 3-5 people. But by and large, it's a stupid way to try to make money. That's great for us who want to be upset.
That's a good argument. I mean, it's a very good argument, and it speaks to why there's a lot of interesting things happening in music right now. The entire music business has collapsed,
Yes.
and because of that, there's all these interesting independent artists.
And
So
what
maybe
about
I just need to be
TV
out of a
too?
job.
No, because
And-
a great thing is happening in cable TV, in which you see characters changing, like in Tolstoy, over years. And you see actors having different things happen to them and to the characters. And that's a whole thrilling new form that I really enjoy. There's about 4 or 5 shows that really are Tolstoyan in their endless development and surprises and changes. Breaking Bad, for instance.
That show
It's
is
astonishing.
phenomenal.
Isn't
Yeah.
it? And unlike the shows that go out and out and out until somebody's selling drugs on Mars, this one comes in and comes in and comes in and comes in. And it becomes like your life only because they're changing the way we change. There are terrific things happening, but they're not so much in the area of where the big bucks are, nor were they ever. You have to sort of try to stay away from that only if you love the things that we said we love. Sometimes you can't help it, and there's nothing wrong with that.
Right.
When it runs away with you, and you haven't done a thing to make it do that. And that's happened to us both. And it's a great feeling. Nothing wrong with money. It's something wrong with going for it, because then it sort of tends to back away, as you may have noticed. I don't mean in your own experience, but I just...
No, you have to excuse me. Half the time I'm completely engaged and thrilled with everything you're saying, and half the time I'm still astonished that I get to sit on the stage with you.
Oh my God.
Thank you so much
for
coming here today, for bringing your print of the film. I am in complete awe of you as a director, and there will never, ever be another Mike Nichols, and I'm thrilled to have had this moment with you, and I'm very, very, very confident that if you do Death of a Salesman, there will be many of us who will come with you. I wouldn't be nervous about that one, but thank you again. It is an absolute honor.